You step up from the underground and the city lands on you all at once. Not visually, you're ready for that. The light adjusts, the street opens out, you find your bearings without really thinking about it. What lands first, before you fully oriented, is the sound. A bus pulling away from the curb, with that particular diesel exhale. A scaffold somewhere above and to the left, metal on metal, irregular. Two people near the entrance, arguing about something neither of them is quite saying. A siren at a distance, fading rather than growing, which some part of you notes and then lets go. A phone playing a video, tinny and bright, on someone's palm. A fan unit on the side of a building doing something it seems to have been doing for a long time, and will continue doing indefinitely. All of this hits within the first few seconds. Then it's absorbed. You adjust your bag, check the direction, start walking. The sounds become, and this is the word everyone uses, background. By the time you reach the corner, you're not hearing any of it. You're thinking about where you're going, or what you need to do when you get there, or nothing in particular. The bus and the scaffold and the siren and the video have become the same thing as the air, present, unremarkable, not worth attention. 20 minutes later, you stop at a light. Your shoulders are sitting slightly higher than usual. There's a low-grade friction somewhere in your attention, like a file taking longer to open than it should. You feel, not stressed exactly, not troubled, just a little ground down, a little more used up than the walk warrants. You don't connect it to the sound. Why would you? You weren't listening. Here's the thing about that. The experience of not listening, of having successfully moved sound into the background, feels like a clean handoff. It feels like the sounds are now somewhere else, in another category, no longer your concern. But the system that processes sound doesn't work that way. It doesn't have a setting for ignore. What it has instead is something more like a continuous monitoring service, one that works even when you're asleep, even when you're absorbed in something else, even when you're completely certain you're not paying attention. What you experience as tuning out is not the same as switching off. The sounds are still going in. The brain is still receiving them. Think about the last time you were in a room with an old air conditioning unit. Not a modern one. One of those wall units that hums at a particular pitch, a thick, unremarkable hum that's just part of the room. You stop noticing it within a few minutes of arriving. It becomes furniture. Then at some point it turns off. And you become aware, in that exact moment, that it had been on. Not as information, as something more physical than that. A change in the room, a shift in a pressure you didn't know you were holding against. You might look up, you might exhale slightly. The room feels different in a way that takes a second to locate, because what you're noticing isn't the new sound. There isn't one. You're noticing the absence of the old one. Which means that for however long you were in that room, reading, talking, working, thinking about something else entirely, some part of you was tracking that hum, continuously, without informing you. The listening was running in the background, not reporting, just watching, and the moment the signal changed, it surfaced. This is how the system works. Not you're hearing this now versus you've stopped hearing this now. More like, you've stopped consciously noticing this, but the processing has not stopped. The sound is still being received, still being assessed, still being held against an expected baseline. It's just that none of that is visible to the part of you that believes it has tuned out. There's a word for what happened with the air conditioning unit, the moment the system says something changed. But the word matters less than what it points to. The fact is that something in you was working on that sound the whole time. The only reason you know is that it stopped. All the sounds you're not noticing right now, whatever's outside your window, whatever hum is in the building, whatever's happening at the edge of your auditory field, are going through the same process. You've moved them to background. They haven't moved anywhere. People who study how the brain handles sound during sleep have found something that takes a moment to absorb. Imagine someone who lives on a street with an occasional rubbish truck. Late collection, say 2 or 3 in the morning. They've lived there for 2 years. They sleep through it without waking. They could tell you, if you asked, that they don't even hear it anymore. What researchers have found is quieter and stranger. The brain still registers the change. The sleeping brain registers the truck, the particular shift in the ambient sound as it approaches, idles, compresses its load, pulls away. A measurable response appears in electrical activity at exactly the moment the sound changes, even though the person doesn't wake, doesn't stir, doesn't show any external sign of having noticed anything. The body, asleep, is running the same quiet watch. It assesses the truck. It decides, known, not urgent, no action required. And it doesn't wake the person. But the processing happened, the listening happened, the person simply wasn't included in the report. It's a little like a night watchman who checks the doors every hour, notes everything that happened, and has the sense to wake you only if something actually requires your attention. You sleep undisturbed, and you conclude in the morning that it was quiet. The watchman's log, if you could read it, would be a different story. This matters because filtering is not free. When you walk down a busy street and successfully move the bus and the scaffold and the tinny phone video into background, something is happening to make that possible. Attended sounds and unattended sounds require different things from the system, but unattended doesn't mean untouched. Deciding that something is not worth attention is itself a process. It uses resources. The filtering is work, even when it doesn't feel like work. You can sense this if you've ever tried to read in a noisy room. The words go in more slowly. You find yourself rereading sentences that you can see you've already read. The noise isn't stopping you from understanding the words. You're still understanding them. But something is being split, and the split costs something. Your working attention is running 2 processes instead of 1, reading, and continuously not listening to everything around you. The busier the sound environment, the more of this work is happening. On a quiet morning in an empty room, the not listening workload is low. Walking through a city at rush hour, it's substantial. And it's substantially invisible. You're not aware of doing it, which makes it easy to arrive somewhere feeling oddly depleted without knowing quite why. Not all sounds tax the system equally. Background noise that's steady and tonally uniform, the hum of ventilation, the low rumble of distant traffic, rain against a window, is, in a relative sense, manageable. The hearing system calibrates to it. It becomes the new silence. But then there's speech, specifically human speech that you can almost follow. Not a conversation you're involved in, a conversation at a nearby table, a voice floating through an open-plan office, someone on a phone 2 meters away. Fragments of it reach you, a phrase, a question, an unexpected laugh. The brain has a particular problem with this. Decades of living in social environments have made us very sensitive to the human voice, much more sensitive than we are to mechanical noise. Human speech activates something different, something that makes a claim on attention and doesn't let go easily. Even when you're doing something else, reading, writing, thinking, a fragment of speech at the edge of your awareness pulls at you the way a half-heard name pulls at you in a crowded room. Was that mine? The system doesn't wait for you to decide whether to engage. It's already checked. In open offices, in cafes, in any space where other people are talking, this is happening constantly. The peripheral conversations are not really in the background. They're in a kind of persistent partial foreground, making a small but continuous claim. The cost is not dramatic. You don't notice yourself paying it. It shows up later, as fatigue that seems slightly out of proportion to what you actually did. There's a particular version of this that happens in transit. You're on the underground. It's reasonably full, but not packed. The kind of carriage where you've found a space to stand. You've got your bag adjusted. You're looking at the middle distance or at your phone. Across from you, or behind you, someone is on a call. You can hear one side of it. What? A pause. No, listen. That's not what I said. A longer pause, then a laugh that doesn't quite communicate why it's funny. And then what? The reason this is hard to ignore is not that it's loud. It might not be loud. It's that it's incomplete. You're receiving one half of a coherent exchange, which means your brain is involuntarily generating predictions about the other half, what the other person must have said, what the reply might be, how the exchange is going to resolve. It's doing this without your permission and without any real prospect of satisfaction, because the other half is never coming. Researchers at Cornell who studied this in 2010 found that people near a one-sided phone conversation, what they called a half-a-log, found it more distracting than a full conversation between two people at the same volume. More distracting, even though you're getting less information. The guessing kept running, and the resolution kept not arriving. That particular loop is expensive. The two people having the full conversation are still using attention resources. You can still hear them. But once you can hear both sides, the guessing slows down. Your hearing system can assess conversation happening, content irrelevant, no action required. With the half-a-log, that resolution never comes. You keep half listening without meaning to, waiting for the shape to complete itself. You arrive at your stop slightly more spent than you went in. What you've been walking through, in a city, is an environment built almost entirely from sound. Some of it you notice. Most of it you don't, not consciously. But the system underneath doesn't make the same distinction. To that system, the city is continuous. A wall of low-frequency input that runs from the moment you leave the building to the moment you come back in. Traffic, HVAC units, the rumble of things underground, construction at some indefinite distance, the accumulated sound of the city and the machines that serve it. Stand at a crossing at the end of the workday and listen for a few seconds. Not to one sound exactly, but to the surface they make together. The buses, the vents, the lift motors, the distant drilling, the underground movement you feel before you locate it. Earlier cities were loud in different ways. The sounds of animals, of trades, of things happening at street level and close range. Loud and various and irregular. Modern urban sound is loud and various too, but in a different proportion. There's a great deal more of it at the lower frequencies. More of it coming from further away. More of it that's tonally consistent and unbroken. Less signal, in a certain sense. More wall. This isn't a complaint about cities. It's a description of the acoustic environment your hearing system has been calibrating against for most of its time in an urban space. Not catastrophic, not intolerable, just present, always present, and always going in. There's a small park in Midtown Manhattan that does something unusual. It's narrow, barely a sliver between two buildings. And at the far end, a wall of falling water runs the full width of the space. Not a fountain exactly, a sheet of water, moving continuously, making a sound that fills the park completely. It's not quiet in there. The waterfall is loud, but it can feel, oddly, calmer than the street outside. Not because the city has disappeared. It hasn't. The traffic is still present, still coming in over the walls and through the air. What changes is the shape of the sound. The waterfall sound is dense and continuous and spectrally broad. It covers a great deal of the same frequency range as the traffic and the construction and the ambient urban rumble. Not cancelling it, but masking it. And because the waterfall is continuous and predictable, the hearing system can calibrate to it quickly. There's nothing to predict, there's no pattern to track. It's just water, reliably, at a known volume, going nowhere in particular. The monitoring can, in a limited way, stand down. Not fully. The brain is still running. But the specific labor of tracking an irregular, unpredictable urban soundscape is being replaced by something that doesn't require the same kind of tracking. The effort shifts. It's not silence. It's not a cure for noise. You walk back out into the street in 20 minutes, and the city is exactly where you left it. But for however long you're in there, something that has been running at a low hum, quietly in the background, without telling you, gets a kind of rest. You come out of the park and turn back onto the main street. The bus is there again, or another one like it. The same diesel exhale, the same particular pitch as it pulls away. A delivery trolley being wheeled over a grate. Someone on the steps of a building finishing a call. Traffic lights changing, and a brief moment when the street holds its breath before the cars move. None of this is new. You've walked this block before, or blocks just like it. The sounds will do what they always do, land on you for a second, get assessed, get filed, get moved somewhere you're no longer consciously tracking. By the next corner, it'll all be background again. You won't be listening. The bus pulls away, and the street settles back into its particular frequency. The grate, the exhaust, the thin thread of a siren somewhere east, getting no closer and no further. Your shoulders are where your shoulders always are on this street. You're thinking about something else. The sounds are still going in,